As I'm sure you're very well aware by now, unless you're new here, hi. I'm a massive fan of farming sim games, and seeing as you're here, I'm gonna assume that you are too. Of course, there's one major game series that we have to thank for the sheer number of titles that we have to sink endless hours of our lives when we're supposed to be doing laundry into, and that is, of course, Harvest Moon. Okay, we've gone over this before, but let's recap the Harvest Moon to Story of Seasons situation/pipeline. The original Harvest Moon games were created by Yasuhiro Wada and developed by Victor Interactive Software, which would eventually be acquired by Marvelous Entertainment in 2003 and are now known as Marvelous Inc. Over the period between 1996 to 2013, Natsume provided English translations for the games and oversaw their distribution. However, in 2014, Marvelous Inc. ceased working with Natsume, and their work was instead handed over to Xseed Games, their American publisher. However, as Natsume owned the English variant of the Harvest Moon name, they decided to keep its rights in the split. This forced the original creators to make the change to Story of Seasons, meaning any games released from 2014 and onwards will be Natsume rather than the original Marvelous Inc. Story of Seasons games, however, while different in name, will come from the original creators of Harvest Moon, and therefore often contain consistent characters from the original series. A solid fan favourite in the OG Harvest Moon series is Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life, the English version of which was released all the way back in March of 2004 for the GameCube, with a PlayStation 2 release arriving the following year. Unsurprisingly, fans of the game were pretty damn excited, if not a little anxious, when Marvelous announced a remake was on its way. Enter Story of Seasons: A Wonderful Life, which was due for release in June of 2023 for the Nintendo Switch, PS5, Xbox, and also on Steam. As is always prominent in the minds of existing fans of any media that's getting a facelift, be it game or movie, many were holding their breath before getting too excited. What if the new version did the original a deep injustice that shattered the hearts and souls of a generation? Exactly. Story of Seasons: A Wonderful Life released earlier this year as planned, and seemed to bring about a pretty sizable buzz when it did. I'd imagine it was a decent success financially too, due to it not only having a sizable returning fanbase, but also down to the influx of newer fans of the genre that have been initiated by games like, yeah, that one, which was of course made as an ode to the Harvest Moon series in the first place. So, just how true is the remake to the original? What's changed for the better, and surely they couldn't have made anything worse? Time to head on in to Forgotten Valley. Let's start off by taking a look at some of the more positive quality of life adjustments that have been made to the title. First up, her. In the original game, this small goat was definitely not the goat, if you catch my drift. Upon reaching their second year in the game, players of Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life would be given the option to purchase a goat from travelling seller, Van. The goat is initially offered to the player for 4,000 G, but Van can be haggled down a little, sealing even the more money-conscious players into their goaty fate. Goat milk earns you more than peasanty cow juice, right? So the goat's worth it. Sure, goat milk does have a better selling price, but this deal with farmy godmother Van does come with a bit of a catch. This goat will only produce said luxurious goat liquid for 1 year, and after that, nada, null, zilch. This little punk is just going to be waltzing around, eating up your resources, and taking up valuable barn space, in exchange for absolutely nothing. The audacity, right? The more naive souls among you may be thinking, just sell the damn goat. Ha, buddy, this can't be sold. Fantastic, right? However, there was one way to solve our little goat problem, yeah. Hate to look away. Players who truly wanted rid of old goatee would actually have to stop feeding it and let it become sick until it eventually, unalived. Charming. Returning, still very much scarred players were relieved to discover that in the Story of Seasons game, although the goat would continue to dry up after a year, she was now sellable. You can now buy one goat, siphon off the good stuff, return and replace. Seems wrong, really. Moving on to something a bit less horrifying, players were also pleased to discover that the process for selling goods at your market stall had actually been revamped for the better. See, in the original version of the game, when opening your store, everything in the player's inventory would be up for grabs, leading to villagers asking for inconvenient things that are kind of essential to your daily life and existence. Your trusty hoe, for instance. Thankfully, this situation was streamlined in Story of Seasons, with players now able to only display a selection of items that they actually want to trade, reducing the amount of time wasted over rejecting unwelcome offers from Molly, although Hugh might still bait you into thinking he's actually going to buy something this time. The alarm clock system has also had a slight upgrade from the earlier game, where it used to limit the player to waking up at any time of the morning. The 2023 release now allows you to choose a time in the afternoon too, allowing for an appreciated increase in the flexibility of gameplay. What I believe to be the most positive change that we've seen in A Wonderful Life is the introduction of the ability for the player to select a non-binary character upon character creation at the start of the game. Notably, much like the other Harvest Moon titles, in Harvest Moon A Wonderful Life, you could only play as a male farmer, with your dating options limited to the female bachelorettes. In order to play as a female farmer and/or date the male candidates, you'd actually need to buy a completely different game. This version of A Wonderful Life was called Harvest Moon, Another Wonderful Life. With the introduction of the non-binary player character, the ability for the farmer to date any of the bachelors or bachelorettes, regardless of gender, was also brought in. One common complaint that I've seen from players who've chosen to play as a non-binary farmer, however, concerns interactions with their child. As a male or female character, the child will refer to them as mummy or daddy, respectively, yet they will simply refer to the non-binary parent by their first name, which some found to be a little uncomfortable or rather cold. I've seen suggestions floating around that it'd be better for the player to be able to choose what they're called by a text field, as they are with their chosen partner. Another noticeable change between the two games is the fact that many of the characters have undergone name changes between releases. Muffy has become Molly, Galen, Gary, Cody is now Gordy, Marlin thankfully became Matthew, Celia morphed into Cecilia, Dr. Hardy is now Dr. Baddock, and Tartan has become Vinny. While understandably slightly jarring for some players, myself included, others appreciated updates to some of the more unique names, making Marlin less fishy, for instance. The fact that some of the characters had originally been given these more obscure names in the first place can be attributed to them being translations from the OG Japanese names. These were then used over multiple original Harvest Moon titles. Sure, it may seem like a bit of an odd move to change some of the names that were already cemented into the series, but once you bring the Harvest Moon to Story Season scenario back into focus, things begin to make a bit more sense. Simply, Natsume still held the copyright to some of these original names, which limited their use in a remake. As it had nothing to do with them, Marvelous needed to get a little creative and mix things up a bit. Celia of Harvest Moon's original Japanese name was Sephiria, which now, as Cecilia, I feel actually sits a lot closer to the original. Two smaller additions to the new game that I'll also quickly mention are, for hybrid crops, some more name changing, but this time of first generation hybrid crops, plus the addition of blue crops, which are those that have infused with a trick blue flower, and 2, the introduction of the bulletin board into Forgotten Valley, which saved players from missing out on requests. Now, one particular set of changes led fans to speculate that the 2023 release of A Wonderful Life had, in fact, been censored. Did it cross something of a line nowadays? Absurd. Surely. Well, at a glance these games do appear to be pretty PG. Surely there wouldn't be anything to clean up. But then I remember how Harvest Moon did introduce me to gambling as an 8-year-old, so... Most notably, the blue bar had become the blue cafe. Mary's character had been seemingly replaced by a squeaky flower man. Gary's cigarette snuffed the heck out. And, most controversially of all, animals could no longer die. While some speculated that these changes had been made in an act to clean up the game, therefore making it more playable to a wider demographic, creating a more inclusive environment, others argue, myself included, that whilst the former is true and a positive consequence of this, the changes were likely down to official age ratings and trying to keep them as low as possible, bluntly to keep profits maximised, with that juicy, largest possible player base. One final point that I'd just like to mention is something notably bad about the Story of Seasons game. Something appalling, abhorrent, burning the eyes of many a poor, innocent player. This redesign. A sheep? I think that's what they have the audacity to call it? How can you take this and then turn it into this? I mean, likely with a bicycle pump. And then to think it's an improvement? Job well done, boys? Crazy. But anyway, did you start off with Harvest Moon A Wonderful Life many, moons ago? Or is the Story of Seasons title your introduction to it all? Let me know your thoughts and feelings down in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed watching this video as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, please don't forget to drop a like/subscribe down below, as it would really help me out. But until next time, goodbye for now.